Scott. I'm nearly 61 years old. I'm an alcoholic addict in recovery, and this is my story. I was born in Seattle, 1964. Middle class family. My dad was a maintenance alcoholic. Rarely, if ever, got drunk, but he drank every day. He developed diabetes late in life. They told him he had to quit drinking, so he switched from McNaughton's and 7 to McNaughton's and Diet 7. My mom was not an alcoholic. My sister is a normie. My sister told me recently that nothing good ever happens after 2 a.m. And I was like, she told me that a long time ago. Could have saved me a lot of hassles. My first experience with alcohol was when I was, I believe, 5. My cousin Diana got married. They'd set up a big bar, and my dad was the bartender. And my cousin and I bugged him until he mixed us a drink with just a splash of bourbon and some pop. And we drank those and somehow conned somebody else into getting us another one. And before long, I found some people that had a van outside, and I went and passed out in it for a while. And when it came to, I went and found my cousin. The bar had shut down, so we went back behind there and took all the bottles. There was a little bit left in each one. We poured everything into one cup, split that in half, and proceeded to get puking drunk. I woke up the next morning, blankets and pillow covered in puke, and my first thought was, when will my next cousins get married? Couldn't wait to do it again. My first exposure to drugs was first or second grade. I absolutely adored my teachers. My teacher sent me home with a flyer and said, watch this program on TV tonight. My family didn't often watch TV together, and so I was kind of excited. I didn't know what to expect. The show came on, and it started showing people being arrested, people overdosing, people freaking out, and I remember being shocked. And then it went to commercial, and this commercial, I'll never forget it. It was a Thanksgiving table set up, family sitting around the table. There was a turkey and mashed potatoes and all my favorite stuff, and there was one seat empty. And the mom calls upstairs, Junior, dinner's ready, and cuts upstairs, and Junior's in the bathroom, and he's drawing up a hit of heroin out of the spoon. And I remember thinking, I knew about needles because I'd had my tonsils out, and I didn't like needles, and I remember thinking, boy, if whatever he's doing is worth putting a needle in his arm and missing out on a turkey dinner, it must be pretty good. And so it kind of had the opposite effect, I think, of what it was supposed to. So we moved from Seattle to Home Valley when I was 7. It was a much smaller town. I really enjoyed living there. It was a great place to grow up. Went to high school at Stevenson High School, which is just up the road. And it was between junior high and high school, I believe, that I met my first love, which is Mary Jane. Sweet Mary Jane. She became my first love, my first obsession. I almost immediately became a daily pot smoker. Throughout high school, I tried cocaine, acid, PCP, mushrooms, mescaline, and speed in the form of cross tops and black beauties. I was a very good student, but my after school activities started getting me in trouble right away. At 15, I got my first MIP. My sophomore year, I participated in the destruction of a hotel room. We were at the state basketball tournament, and me and some friends destroyed a couple rooms thinking we were rock stars. We were drinking heavily, smoking a lot of pot. At 17, summer before my senior year, I got my first felony for destruction of private property in excess of $5,000. I had dropped some acid and had a kind of an altercation with a guy and took it out on his pickup truck after he left the party. So I graduated with high honors, and instead of going to college like all my friends, I went to Ohio, went to a trade school, learned how to become an audio engineer. Music was a major force in my life. I played the drums all through high school. My senior year, I dropped some acid one night and ended up with a guitar in my hand and thought, I'll do this. And so once I graduated and then got back from Ohio, I went to move to Seattle, and I figured that an acoustic guitar was a lot easier to haul around than a drum kit. So I became a guitar player. I figured I'd move to Seattle and instantly be able to find a job in the music industry. And the music industry is not that easy to get into, so I ended up working a series of really shitty jobs and developed a cocaine habit. It was kind of an ongoing thing for quite a while. It wasn't too bad of a habit until I met this woman who was about twice my age. She taught me how to smoke crack, and within 6 months, everything I knew, everything I owned was gone. And so I ended up going to rehab for the first time. I got out of rehab, went back to Seattle, and kind of fell into the best job I've ever had in my life. It was a dream job, working in the music industry as an audio engineer. Got to party with rock stars. got to play on stage with a few rock stars. Saw a lot of really good bands. Saw a lot of really shitty bands. It was a sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle. It was at that time that I met my son's mother. We were roommates. She was a cocktail waitress at a club that I worked at. We became roommates. We became roommates that had a kid together. We stayed together for quite some time, and when he was about 4, we split up, and I moved into a boarding house and ended up meeting Cindy. Cindy was a prostitute, about 30 years older than me at the time. And she turned me on to doing speedballs, heroin and cocaine, when I picked up a new habit. Managed to maintain my lifestyle for quite a while, even though as my habit grew. I ended up running up a huge bill on a company credit card, and my boss, rather than call the cops, sent me to rehab the second time. So I went to rehab, came back. My son and his mother moved to Wisconsin, and my boss suggested that I follow them. So I tried to move to Wisconsin. It didn't work out. In the dead of winter, I had actually picked up the heroin habit again, and I kicked on a 3-day drive across the country in freeze and freeze patrol. That didn't work out. So I bought a train ticket back to Seattle. My intention was to go back to Seattle, buy as much heroin as I could, and to unalive myself. A friend of mine somehow caught word of that, changed my ticket destination to Portland. So I got on the train and landed in Portland rather than Seattle. And he introduced me to shooting meth. So I lived on the streets for about 3 years shooting meth. At one point, I got very, very low in my life and decided to unalive myself and stepped in front of a moving vehicle. That led to an adventure, a road trip adventure that lasted about 8 months with a friend. We went to Arizona, and it was a very spiritual journey. But as soon as the moment I came back, I went right back to the needle, went back to meth. During that time, one night, I was sitting in an apartment, and I realized that because in those days I was staying up anywhere from 7 to 21 days at a time, and I realized that most people sleep for 8 hours a night. I've been carrying a guitar around for 15 years at that point, and I only knew about 5 chords. So I decided to dedicate some time to playing the guitar every day, and I became, over that course of 3 years being homeless, I became a fairly accomplished guitar player and songwriter. Um, so then I met Lisa. When I met Lisa, why she, what she found attractive in me, I do not know, because my glasses were held together with wire and electrical tape across the bridge of the nose and both sides. My pants were being, which I think were borrowed, were held up by a phone charging cord tied around my waist. I was a mess, and so was she, actually. And we decided to get our shit together. So we moved to Connell, Washington, which is close to where her son was living. And I got a job, and over the course of the next several years, we stopped doing that. And but we smoked a lot of pot. And my dad died in 2001, and so we moved to the Dalles to be closer to my mom. And it wasn't long after that that we both started drinking. And by the time we were together 14 years, by the time we split up, we were both pretty much raging alcoholics. I was drinking vodka at the time by the half gallon because I could buy local vodka for about as much as a normal person would pay for a fifth of whiskey. And it wasn't long before I was drinking a half gallon a night. And sometimes on top of several 211s. So then I met Regina. I had worked with Regina, and she had moved out of town. She came back and got a hold of me, and so I left Lisa for Regina. And she told me on our second date that when I met her, she was clean off of meth as well. And our second date, she told me that she had relapsed. And I didn't realize that meant she was continuing to relapse. And so we got together, and one morning she made me a cup of coffee, and when I got to work, I was leaving skid marks everywhere. And I called her and said, "What'd you put in my coffee?" And she said, "Nothing, something natural." I said, "Yeah, whatever." I got home that night and said, "Well, if you're getting high, I'm getting high," and we were off and running. So we moved to Colville, which is north of Spokane, about 75 miles, and lived up there for a little while, and we ended up splitting up. And I lived with her daughter and her family for a while, and she strictly forbade meth use, but Regina and I were off and on for a long time when we would get together for the sole purpose of doing meth together. So when we finally split all together, she introduced me to Misty, who was the love of my life. And Misty and I used together for quite a while before we actually started using needles again. And to that point, I was just smoking it. And so I was back and running again using the needle. And we ended up homeless. We ended up moving back to Skanania County, back to Stevenson, and we were homeless together for quite a while. We did the on again, off again relationship, and I started breaking out in handcuffs on a pretty regular basis. So at one point, I was in jail for a 30-day run, and talked to my lawyer about going to rehab. So I got out with full intent of going to rehab, and the rehab I intended to go to, I got out on Thursday. I was supposed to report on Tuesday, and they closed their doors on Monday. And so I called the Seattle office and got signed up for a bed there. It was going to be a 5-week wait, and within about a week, they closed their doors as well. So I kind of ran them up for a little while until Misty took me aside one day and said, "You need to go to rehab." And so I called Cedar Nar in Seattle, which is now Keys Recovery, and they told me 5 to 7 weeks. And to call back the next day. And so I called back the next day, and they said 7 to 9 weeks. I told them they were going the wrong way. Um, they told me I had to do an assessment, so I went to the county and had an assessment done. The lady wanted to put me in IOP, and I told her, I said, I'm trying to get into a year-long program. IOP's not going to work for me. I just won't show up. And so I didn't. And after 9 weeks, they finally had a bed open up, and I had to be reassessed because so much time had elapsed. And the lady was pretty mad at me for not having checked in for the IOP. But she did an assessment, and I went to rehab for a year-long program. I lasted about 6 months, and then COVID happened, and so I dropped out. It was a matter of days, and I had to leave them. I ended up moving to the Dalles and was living pretty much on the streets. I did need a friend that would let me stay on her couch on occasion, but for the most part, I was on the streets, shooting a lot of meth, playing guitar for money, and did a lot of recycling. And then on September 9th, 2022, I got thrown in jail for 90 days. First night there, they thought that I was cause for alarm, so they put me in a suit in which you cannot harm yourself. And it's a rug. They strip you naked. They put you in a rug with armholes with Velcro down the front, and they watch you for 3 days in a room that's got no sharp corners. And it was humiliating. It was degrading. It was probably the single most horrific moment of my life at that point. Despite that, I sat there for almost 3 months, planning my next high, planning who I was going to get high with, where I was going to get the dope, the whole 9 yards. The day I was released, I walked out. It was in the evening that they let me out. I walked outside. Within 5 minutes, somebody offered me a bowl of pot, and I said, no, thank you. And 5 minutes after that, somebody offered me some meth, and I said, no, thank you. And I like to say that it was by grace and not by mercy. I didn't ask for it, but a lifelong compulsion, 40 years of use, and it was removed from me. I give that credit to God. He decided that I was done long before I did. And to this day, I've managed to hold on to that by being grateful and doing what I can to maintain that gratitude and that conscious contact with a higher power. I started going to 12-step programs, and my first day walking through the door, there was an old man named John. He shook my hand, told me I was welcome there, and it had a very good effect on me. So I went to a lot of meetings and got a job. I was living under the freeway, but they didn't seem to care at the meetings. They accepted me anyway. The fact that I was all dusty most of the time, and I would have to hide my shopping cart before I could come in. But I slowly started developing fellowship, making friends with people, feeling more at home. One day at the Dollar Tree, I ran into my friend Carrie, and we barely knew each other, but we sat and talked for about 45 minutes in the aisle, and we talked about everything but recovery, and that was the first time that I felt like I belonged in the fellowship. And I started going to speaker meetings and conferences and anything I could go to that was recovery related that wasn't an actual meeting. So because of the social aspect of it, and I felt more and more at home all the time. At 18 months clean and sober, I had reestablished a relationship with my mother. My mother was 86 years old, and the plan was that I was going to move in with her, take care of her in her waning years. Instead, some old stuff from years prior popped its ugly head up, and I went to jail I was sentenced to a year, ended up doing 9 months. While I was in there, I lost my mom. They sent in a minister for grief counseling, and I ended up turning it into a 12-step meeting. went in there with the full intent of carrying the message with me. I held a couple meetings while I was in there. So when I got out, I stayed at my mom's house. I was a little worried because it was in Stevenson, and when I lived there before, they had very few meetings. And I was pleased to find out that they had meetings 7 days a week. I met a whole new crew, made, expanded my fellowship by a whole bunch of new people, um, and caught a lot of meetings. I ended up moving uh, back to the Dalles, got my job back, uh, jumped right back into the recovery community. Uh, at one point, my best friend for 50 years, I was at work one morning and I got my phone rang and it said her name popped up, and I said hello, and it was her son, and he said, "If you want to come see mom, you better come see her now." So I went up to the hospital and I spent 4 days holding her hand and watched her take her last breath, and managed to stay sober through that. And ended up developing a relationship with her daughter and her grandson that was turned out to be a true blessing. And so in her honor, she got clean a week after I did. And so had she not passed away, she would be coming up on 3 years this next week, because I got 3 years yesterday. I burned a lot of bridges. As I said before, I had the greatest job of all time, and ended up just burning it down. I was making really good money, doing what I always wanted to do. I was hanging out with the coolest people in the world, and I burned it all down. Heroin and cocaine more important. Became more important than my son. Uh, when I moved away from Wisconsin and ended up back on this coast, I basically abandoned my son for the 3 years that I was out on the streets. He didn't hear from me at all for about 3 years. And so uh, when I split up with Lisa and got with Regina and started using again, he basically cut ties with me altogether, and we're just now working on reestablishing that relationship. I have come from a fairly large family, as far as my mom had 7 brothers and sisters, so I have many cousins, and there's only a couple of them that I talk to anymore. I basically shunned from the whole family, and but I'm working on rebuilding those relationships. And, it's taking time, but it's slowly I'm getting back to gaining their trust and their respect again. So I've been working on a book. Um, I had intended to write my entire life, but drugs always got in the way. I would fill notebook after notebook with nonsense over the years, and being fluent and sober has given me clarity of mind, and I've been able to. I'm about 30 chapters in. It's a collection of short stories about homelessness and drugs and jail and all the stuff that comes with it. And I'm getting pretty close to finish. We're going to have to start shopping for publishing. Pretty excited about that. Um, Also, reestablishing a relationship with my mom before she passed. One of my fondest memories will be of going to her house and making a big pot of soup. Um, my mom ate like a bird. She got really tiny before she passed, and I would make a pot of soup and she would eat it in the course of about a couple of days. And it was always pleased me to watch her enjoy my soup. Soup is a kind of a metaphor for me for a lot of things. Like I at my job now, I make soup on a regular basis. I call it making medicine. Uh, it's also a metaphor. I love the story of Stone Soup where the whole town comes together and everybody contributes a little bit of something into the pot and is able to feed the whole town. And despite the fact that individually none of them had, they considered having themselves as having nothing, and put together they managed to make something wholesome and healthy. So soup is a metaphor I use quite a bit in meetings. I say it's making medicine. I think there. I had a friend that had almost 40 years sober. I found out recently that he passed away about a year ago. Uh, his name was Tony. They called him Eskimo Tony. And he taught me that there are three great medicines. One is making soup, healthy food that you can share with other people. Number two is frequent laughter. And number three is sharing of kind and wise words. That's a lesson I got from Tony, and I owe him very much for that. He was an awesome guy. He could definitely make me laugh, and he definitely said some wise things, and always kind. As far as maintaining sobriety goes, I recommend that you jump in to the social aspect of it. Um, just going to just going to meetings will keep you sober for a while, but unless you feel like you belong, you'll eventually not want to be there anymore. Um, as I mentioned before, I go to a lot of speaker meetings, potlucks, any kind of recovery social events I like to go to. Um, I don't drive, so I catch rides to meetings now and again, out of town meetings, and I find that the ride itself is sometimes more beneficial than the meeting itself. I also like to go to meetings out of town as often as I can, try to broaden my fellowship and add more people to my recovery circle. And yeah, just it's a matter of embracing it. Um, I also found that this is the first time in my life that I embraced things like my probation instead of running from it. For years, every time I would get in trouble, they'd say, "Okay, you got a year's probation," and I would be like, "Okay, well, I guess I can't live in Oregon for a year," and I would disappear. And and now I absolutely love my probation officer. I have the whole staff up there. They've sent me to classes. I embraced the classes. They sent me to intensive outpatient. My last session, I was absolutely heartbroken because I just fell in love with my counselor. I've uh, I've embraced the whole aspect, the whole concept of cleaning, getting sober, and taking care of cleaning up the wreckage of my past in a responsible manner. I love my job. I love the responsibility of owing somebody my time so that I can go in there and, like I say, make some medicine and in return get a paycheck for it. How about that? So yeah, been a matter of embracing responsibility and embracing life as life on life's terms. I think that the biggest lesson that I've learned is um, most of my life I look for happiness outside myself. I look for it in other people. I look for it in chemicals. Um, and I've discovered through the program that happiness comes from within. And and I've tried to cultivate that. And I try to cultivate an air of positivity about myself. I try to carry a positive message to everyone I come in contact with. There's a line in the big book that says, "My peace of mind is directly proportional to the peace of mind I give to those around me." That's kind of been my mantra. Yesterday, I celebrated 3 years of sobriety. I celebrated by going to a meeting and hanging out with my friends. The same thing when I lost my best friend. She passed at 5:01 in the evening, and at 5:30, I was walking into a meeting, uh, and I dealt with my grief at that time. That meeting ended. I went to another meeting that evening and dealt with it again, and it just helps me process things. Never once did I consider going out and getting high or getting drunk. It just um, I celebrate recovery the same way that I deal with life amongst people who understand, care. I think my mom was probably the most supportive. Um, she she recognized changes in me right away. Uh, when I was in jail when she passed, I was in rec one day, and the sergeant and a sheriff came in, and they took me out into the hall, and the sheriff introduced himself as a chaplain, and I knew right then. I said, "My mom's passed away." He said, "Yes." We sat down to talk, and at one point, I told him, as I was 22 months clean sober at that point, or excuse me, 26 months at that point. And I told him that I was clean sober. And he says, "Yeah, I could tell." And it bothered me really bad. So about 3 weeks later, I asked if I could speak with him again. There was a meeting. We sat down, and I asked him. He said, "Do you need more grief counseling?" I said, "No, I just need you to answer me a question." He said, "When I mentioned that I was clean sober, you said that, yeah, I can tell." And I said, "How is it that you can tell?" And he said it was my clear eyes, my my skin looked good, and my general demeanor, the way that I held myself, the way that I spoke, and that had a really big impact on me. I don't even remember the gentleman's name, but um, that was a real turning point for me that confirmed uh, that I was doing the right thing and was on the right path. Other than that, I have a lot of friends. Um, my friend Chris, who's shooting this video, has been a big help, big support. We go to a lot of meetings together, and we hang out now and again. My long-term goal is to be a published author, um, to continue playing the guitar, and I paint as well. I would like to get to a point where I can uh, paint enough to make a regular living at it. Uh, getting getting to the point where I'm going to have to retire soon. I would I I would eventually like to live possibly at the coast. Uh, I like painting the water, and although that's kind of a cliched thing, I think I could possibly make a decent living at it someday, and to maintain my sobriety till I draw my last breath. I'm big on quotes. Oscar Wilde once said, "Experience is the name that we give our mistakes," and I've had a lot of experiences. um, but that's exactly what they are. It's experiences. If you learn from them, to not repeat them, and to grow from them. There is a solution. You don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore. Um, I lived in daily hell for a long time, not knowing it was hell. Um, but it got to the point where I didn't want to live anymore, and the solution was quite obvious, but it just seemed so far removed from my reality at the time. Um, that I couldn't see it. Uh, I got fortunate, like I said, God removed the compulsion from me. It's up to me now to just maintain that through an attitude of gratitude and by surrounding myself with supportive people and to try to help others to get the gift that I was given. And yeah, you don't have to live like this. When I first got clean sober, it took me a little while to get to the point where I realized that my old life was over and a new life was beginning. And I actually had to go through a mourning process for the person I used to be. There was parts of me that I did like. Um, I'm not a stupid person. Didn't spend 40 years out there because I was miserable. Um, for the most part, I had a really good time until towards the end. It just there was no good in it anymore. Start breaking out in handcuffs, and you have absolutely no control over anything in your life. Then it's time to give it up. Time to try something new. Um, so trying my best to embrace this new me, and so far it's been working out pretty good. And that's my story. And thank you for listening.